Hello, everyone, and welcome to this innovator webinar. So today it's a pretty interesting topic: is crypto ready for quantum? So we've heard everything about how AI is going to kill all the jobs and steal all of the jobs, and now quantum, right? So it's becoming a real thing, no longer theoretical, and there are like tons of startups trying to build bigger, more stable quantum computers. In March 2026, there was a Google paper that was able to completely cut the estimated cost of breaking the cryptography behind some of the major cryptocurrencies, and lots of things have evolved since. And it's hard. The clock is ticking faster and faster, basically. And today we're very fortunate to be joined by Tamir from Succinct, Ivan from Quantum, and Bruno from Algorand. And so we'll look at this problem of coming from different perspectives of like how real the threat is, over what type of horizon, how pressing it is, and try to be of like, okay, what's next? How do we build in this environment, and what's important? Just before we get started, as usual, a quick disclaimer that all the information contained in this webinar is informational only and not intended as investment advice or any other kind of advice. And without further ado, let's do a quick round of intros of our panelists. So who would like to start?
Well,
Bruno, go for it.
Yes. Okay. So this is the hardest bit. I always hate to introduce myself, but I'll get it out of the way first. So hi, I'm Bruno. I've been with the Algorand Foundation about 3.5 years. The CTO at the moment. I've been in the space for a little bit. I worked in consensus in the Ethereum ecosystem for a few years, and briefly in Cardano as well. And yeah, nice to be here discussing this topic with you guys.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ivan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Quantum. We are a company specialized in enterprise solutions for post-quantum security, which ranges from anything you would consider a threat for existing digital asset companies, but we're also building novel products like Layer 1 chain. And we are also active in the community where we are trying to optimize algorithms, use quantum computers. We are pretty active on the ECDSA challenge, on the optimization area challenge. So we basically have two sides. One, you could say, is something like a research lab. How do we improve or say get to the Q day faster, but in an ethical way where we disclose everything and it's not a surprise, like it doesn't happen immediately. Like everyone knows essentially how it progresses. And on the other side, we are trying to kind of help existing chains, stablecoin issuers, exchanges, anyone who has a risk of being attacked by a quantum computer once it's cryptographically relevant. That's kind of what we're doing.
Awesome.
And I'm Tamir. I'm from Succinct and head of cryptography there. Before that, I did algebraic geometry in academia. And we are a zero-knowledge proof company. Specifically, we've made SP1, which is a zero-knowledge virtual machine or a general-purpose proving system that allows you to make succinct proofs, which are really helpful for blockchain scaling. We've also been thinking about the challenges that quantum computing presents to blockchain and how snarks and modern cryptography can help alleviate some of the problems that are generated or some of the things that become not available anymore with post-quantum primitives.
Wonderful. And so before we get into the risks and exactly, where we are at the readiness in terms of quantum, let's first take a step back and could you try and explain to the audience what exactly is quantum computing? Why is it relevant and important in the digital asset space in the first place?
Yeah, I'll go with an explanation which is maybe very non-technical, so a lot of people can understand it. So if you think about a quantum computer, it's not a magically better box or magically better computer. It's more like, imagine a computer like a microscope. So you have like microchips, they do some calculations, you get zeros and ones, and it kind of works pretty well to create digital products. So that's kind of how you can imagine a computer itself. And now a quantum computer, you could imagine something like a even deeper microscope, which you attach to your existing microscope. And so this specific quantum microscope can look even in a smaller space where you have these so-called qubits. And qubits are very special, I would say, elements, or atoms, or whatever you want to call them, which don't really have a fixed number attributed to them. It's not a 1 or a 0 like a regular bit. It exists in this so-called superposition, and there's these famous things like Schrödinger's cat and the double slit experiment, all of these things which everyone kind of knows. But essentially, because there is this superposition, for some things, not for everything, it's not like a magically better box where you can do everything better. For some things, it gives us an advantage. And so far, the most prominent advantage is cryptography. So Peter Shor, a professor from MIT, theoretically proved that he can use properties from a quantum device or a quantum computer to essentially break current security assumptions of current encryption, like RSA or elliptic-curve encryption. And this is very relevant because cryptographic assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum are more or less all of them are based on elliptic-curve encryption. Of course, you have ZK, we have all of these other things which are some of the quantum proof. Like the majority is ECDSA. And that's very relevant to understand. So a quantum computer is not this magical thing which will kind of, produce flying cars tomorrow. It's not like, it's for some things it's even not really useful.
Yeah.
But for crypto, it's very useful.
Yeah, and basically, right, a wallet is a private key to some kind of encryption algorithm. And if you have a quantum computer that can all of a sudden decrypt what your private key is, well, somebody can get access to your assets. Okay, any other? I think there was a great summary. Tamir, if you want to add on top.
Yeah, not much to add except, one thing I will add is there's quantum computer is a specialized thing. There are also other potential advantages that people are researching, for example, in medicine and like molecule simulation. So it's not just that they develop it to steal all of our money, but obviously this is one of the main reasons that state actors are very interested in this technology. And just adding to Ivan, like, what does it mean to have a cryptographic asset? Unlike traditional finance, there is no bank that actually controls your asset and can override anything. Like in blockchain, one of the innovations of the technology is that there are no overrides. So that's why it's really crucial for our space.
I'll just add that this is not a problem, like the guys mentioned correctly. So it's a problem for elliptic-curve, in particular cryptography, ECDSA and EDDSA, that at least we use a lot. We're worried about it as well. It's a problem also for the rest of the internet and most systems around. So even protocols like commonly used like TLS has been thinking about this, and they have taken measures as well. So it's more broad than blockchain, although when we look at blockchains, it's just a ledger in the public where you can see what you can try to get. So it has some more exposure in a way, but it's a generic problem for everyone.
And for those who don't know, and I probably will mess it up, but TLS is kind of, I think, is the new generation of what's used to be the protocol SSH, and it's basically the little lock you see when you visit a website that ensures
Yeah, it's the protocol that defines how we agree schemes to establish connections in the internet, and it has the same problem. And,
very cool. So following the quantum report that came up, right? I think the Google report explicitly named Algorand as one of the chains that was running early post-quantum algorithms. What's the state of post-quantum crypto? What does it look like, and what developments do you view as the most meaningful indicators of the progress in the space?
So it depends which ecosystem you ask, you'll get different answers. So there's people moving in one direction with hash-based signatures. There is the lattice crowd. There's the ZK crowd, like Tamir might chip in on it here. We obviously, at least for us, for years, we've been using particularly lattice-based cryptography for certain use cases, namely around state proofs, which guarantees the integrity, historical proof of the ledger. So we create these snapshots over time with Falcon signatures, with a multitude of co-signers that are participating in the network. And so we are a little bit on the lattice camp, I would say, but Google made mention of our sort of innovations and us putting post-quantum applications in the field, which we always try to do. But we're not excluded to just lattice-based crypto. We're looking at all the options. And I think that's what everybody should do, because all these new signature schemes, techniques, and post-quantum applications we can deploy, they don't come without a cost. And all of us that are building and designing the systems know full well that there is a compromise by adding very large data sets. It puts burden on storage, on networking, ability to prove things in useful time. It does come, it's a balancing act of what we can put out. So I think the early people are trying out these and releasing things in the field, the better, because we're going to learn from that. And I think we shouldn't exclude all the options. It's probably a good application for all the techniques that are being discussed around.
Yep. And Ivan and Tamir, what are your views on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we at Succinct in general are very, so as Bruno kind of mentioned, okay, now elliptic curves are broken, what do you do? So there are alternatives. People have been thinking about this for over 30 years, even more. Every time I feel older when I think of how much time has passed since 90. So people have been thinking about this, and there are also standardizations of new signature schemes. And yeah, I do agree that we need to look at all of them. In terms of ZK proving in general, I think we at Succinct are pretty conservative. So we're kind of like always would rather use the least new thing. And so that's like one thing for the hash-based schemes, that it's like, okay, this is kind of like the least fancy thing that is hard to break. And the other thing that maybe we can get into later is that I think there is more miracles that, for example, aggregation of proofs or ZK enables that could alleviate some of the costs that are associated with like these bigger signature schemes.
That is Ethereum's roadmap, essentially, to say, let's use ZK to, because hash, like in the cryptographic space, you have hashes, which are considered the most safe, but they're also the biggest. So it's like a trade-off. But before I speak about progress, I would like to maybe take a step back and say something where we are currently with quantum computers, because that's something no one really talks about. And I think that is actually very relevant for people to understand what is actually possible on today's devices. So today's devices are making progress. So there is definite progress. There is a few companies which are really, really good. like Q-Era, for example, it's like the team from Harvard doing quantum computers. There's also Honeywell, which is investing a lot in Quantinuum, which also recently the IPO. But in general, currently we have too little qubits to do cryptographically relevant stuff on them. So there was this famous Q-Day prize, or I don't know what it was called, and then someone kind of broke 15 bits on a quantum computer. But the thing is, with small numbers, like 15 bits, you cannot really prove a quantum advantage. Like you can say, this could have been solved with a random number generator or something like this. So in the real quantum devices, we currently cannot do all these fancy stuff. But progress is coming from both investments in quantum computing companies. So these companies are getting billions and billions of dollars now. And we didn't really have the AlexNet moment yet in quantum. The AlexNet moment is like where you had the realization that GPUs are really good for model training for AI, and then after that, you basically just scaled that. We don't really have that yet. So we don't know if it's going to be a neutral atom platform, a photonic platform. There's different quantum computers, different platforms. So we don't really know which is going to win. Some people are betting on neutral atoms. Some are betting on photons. We will see, but there will be the AlexNet moment. So this is out of question. So at one point we will see, that is the best device we can scale and which can be useful. On the other side, we also are getting a lot of progress on the quote-unquote algor software side. Let's say you need two things in a sense. You need a quantum device, which is sufficient in qubit size and gates, but that's maybe a bit more complicated. And on the other hand, you need good algorithms. And what you've seen in the last year or 2 years, the number of theoretical qubits, I'm saying theoretical because we don't have these devices yet, so you cannot say for sure until we test, but theoretically and kind of proven, the number is dropping drastically from 20 million qubits to thousands. And now what we are seeing in the last, I would say 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So it's a really nice story. The team from EigenLayer, I think it was one of their developers who was like, okay, let's build a platform where every LLM, let's say where people with advanced knowledge how to use LLMs can compete to optimize the number of qubits which Google have. And we have now 44% better results than Google in just like a short time frame, I think 3 weeks or so. One of our engineers is like fighting on this leaderboard. It's like him and like 2 others who are kind of in the trenches trying to kind of be the number one. But that's really interesting because these are people who have not as much quantum experience, but are really good at using LLMs. And they are, by any scientific method, if you want, they are actually proving something. And that is very interesting. Mm-hmm. I think that is the biggest, newest trend we are seeing in a sense.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, the other thing with quantum is that there are kind of like two clocks ticking. On the one hand, there is the securing the liveness and of the blockchain and making sure like this side continue. But on the other hand, there's also, well, okay, how do you do the transition? And if a certain signature can be broken down the line and you can access the underlying data, right? Like what happens with that if the data can be decrypted? So how, from an institutional perspective, thinking about the crypto space, how should custodians or allocators think about this?
Yeah, so the biggest risk for companies which are sitting on private data, say Texas or dark pools, anyone who has kind of proprietary data, those guys or those companies, they should look into quantum immediately because someone can harvest those data points. And if they are relevant for a longer period of time, when a quantum device would be able to break them, that's a pretty big risk, right? So maybe you don't want your client's data to be out there in like a few years. So for them, I think it's currently on the blockchain side, the digital asset side, it's a bit different. It's public anyways, right? So there is no risk of harvesting all the decrypt layer. But the biggest risk here is that if you start too late, you will not be able to transition in time, because there is also the social kind of migration part, which means that people have to actively do an action to go to a new chain or to a new wallet or new whatever infrastructure you have. And that part is very, very, very difficult, right? All of us are kind of, delaying everything we need to do for compliance, whatever. And like, you need to tell a person, I don't know, 10 times for him to do an action. So that's the biggest issue, I would say.
Yeah, Bruno, I think you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I'll just add that. In terms of actual encryption, so there's different mechanisms people use to encrypt data. So there is an asymmetric sort of mechanism with things like, it's called Diffie-Hellman and an agreement of secrets. That is one that is can be affected by quantum, because it relies on elliptic curves, and if you know somebody's public key, you can figure out things. But the symmetric schemes, as far as I know, they're unaffected in a way. They're still quite resistant if quantum computers come online.
So what you're saying, the Diffie-Hellman part, that's right, that's a handshake, right? So in SSL, TLS, that's when you create the secure connection, and then you use symmetric cryptography to continue communicating, right?
Yes, but it relies on both parties keeping their own private counterpart to themselves, right? So, but the actual encryption, I mean, if you use AES, GCM 256, is probably fine. Not an expert here, but I do think that's where most people agree. There is one philosophical thing here, is that, for example, the harvest now, decrypt later, when it comes to blockchains or public ledgers, even if the quantum thing wasn't a real threat, from a philosophical point of view, I don't like to, even if they encrypted, putting something public in the clear for, because we don't know what can happen, even with these new schemes. Like we don't know, they might even be classically affected, not just the quantum effect. So even from
that happened before, that happened already. So some lattice schemes were broken with classical computers.
Right, exactly. So even from a philosophical point of view, it comes to blockchains.
And 0 days happen, right? So they're...
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at, whether people should be building new things or using like super established solutions. And so to start this, let's go to Ivan and talk about quantum. So you're building a chain that's quantum safe from Genesis, right? And tools on top of it to help existing chain retrofit the work that you've laid out. And you've been working on Ethereum and Tron. So why are you looking at both sides? Where do you think is the future lies? And what do you think the market is looking for?
So for us, it's about being ethically the best company for users ultimately. So that's kind of what we care about. And there's multiple elements to this. One is, I will be the happiest person in the world if Ethereum, Bitcoin, and every chain we have right now, Algorand, any chain, would transition immediately without any problems. That would be amazing. Like, we would just focus on, selling them maybe some services or products to do that, and great, right? Everyone's happy. Like, that's the best case scenario. And the reality is, though, it's a decentralized system, and in decentralized systems, it's very hard to do things fast. It's almost like democracy, right? So everyone has an opinion, everyone has something to say, everyone is kind of discussing which cryptography to use. So there is a lot of things which kind of slow down this technical migration part. I'm not even speaking about the social one. So there's two main things to understand. Technically, no one, except for Algorand and some, I think, aspects of the chain, hasn't done really any post-quantum work so far. And I think Algorand and maybe Starknet are here like the two companies I would like to highlight who are doing something. and legitimately something. On the other hand, even if that was cleared today, let's say today we can press a button and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of them have like the best possible technical solution, upgraded, forked, whatever they need to do. Then you have hundreds of millions of users who also have to migrate. Right? So everyone has to change their wallet, because if you keep your assets on your old school wallet, without your signature, I cannot force you to migrate in a sense. That is the bigger challenge. So taking these two things, you can now take a probabilistic model and say, what is the likelihood that those chains and communities will migrate before the worst case Q-day scenario, 3 years? Very, very slim chances. Best case Q-day scenario is maybe 20 years. Okay, that might happen, right? So it depends on when Q-day is. Now, for us, we see our layer one as something as a, in a sense, last resort thing, right? So if no one has migrated, you as a user see that, you get informed, your custodian tells you, whatever, your partners tell you, well, you know, if you want to be in crypto, you should look at post-quantum chains. I'm not saying we're the only one, there's multiple others, but it's kind of this backup plan. That's how we see our layer one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, and speaking of the transition, right, Bruno,
Yeah.
and your founder has co-authored papers, I think, with Schnorr, right, on, and so there has been a lot of things going on, and you have been working on moving to a quantum resistant algorithm in various stages. Can you walk us through that migration and how it's been going so far?
Yeah, quite lucky to work with very smart people around on this topic. So, I mean, Algorand since 2022 has been thinking about this problem. It has deployed state proofs for quite a few years now. They've been running. Obviously, there's elements of the network. It's quite funny. People mention us from the Google paper, and a lot of times they count the number of times Algorand shows on the paper, and often incorrectly say, "Oh, Algorand is fully quantum secure today." That's not the case. So there's a lot of elements that we need to address to get to that stage. And we have been thinking about this problem, but there's also a philosophical angle to this, which is the optionality and being pragmatic about the problem. So as Ivan correctly mentioned, so quantum computers today, they're not stable enough to attack us today. It kind of gets to a consensus now that most people think it's more likely than not they're going to come eventually. But would it make sense for us to migrate today for a fully post-quantum scheme where our signatures are massive, our network gets slower, we cannot do blocks in 2.5 seconds, we have to do it in 5, 6, 10 seconds. Like there's a balancing act. I think it's more important to have a plan and obviously think of this problem we mentioned before is just because we introduced these new schemes, and most likely they're very secure, and NIST also is a big organization that we look for endorsement in some of these schemes. But just because they're quantumly secure, as I mentioned before, doesn't mean that they might be classically secure. And there is perhaps a time where a lot of networks and projects like TLS, maybe they're going to live in a world where they edge our bets a little bit, in which we combine two multiple schemes in case quantum comes online, we are protected. But if these quantum schemes get broken, the classically secures the network. And in terms of transition, like Ivan mentioned, it's very challenging for most networks. Now, in Algorand, we do have a little bit easy because we do have this property called rekeying, in which you can take the account or the address that you see in a ledger, and you can just point to a different key and say, you authorize me now. And you never have to migrate your assets. You never have to migrate your account. You just say, instead of this key over here, now I point to this other key, and could be a post-quantum secure signature scheme. And And we have this today. So in terms of migration, we're quite confident once we laid out the road that users will migrate quite seamlessly. And our wallets do support this natively.
Can I just ask a question here before Tamir? Sorry to interrupt. It's the user still has to do something though, right? Like he has to press a button or whatever.
Yes, he has to say, it's called a rekeying, saying, hey, I have this other key, and you just point to that key. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that's easier than moving funds, but still you have to activate the user and somehow get to him and tell him, do it.
Yeah, it's like making one transaction to change the authorization model of your account. And it's quite, most of our wallets do support that natively. It's quite a used feature. It's not, what makes it easier is that you don't have to create a new set of words, back them up, like I have to move my funds. If you build history on an account, it is, yes, as you say, a flip of a button and you rekeyed immediately. So
yeah, on the new chain versus migration, I don't know if I think there's kind of a split thing. Obviously, it's sometimes easiest to build something new, but also existing systems have a lot of information inside them that is kind of implicit, that no one really knows, and it's kind of like in the code or in the protocol that kind of like battle tested. And I think it depends on how seriously the project take it. I think Bruno's approach is correct. Like you should have a plan, you should start doing the plan, and depending on evidence, maybe it should be rushed more or less. But there's no need to rush it right now, right? Because there are a lot of risks, whether it's like something breaks suddenly. Another risk is, implementations are going all wrong. Like all these signature schemes are actually really hard to implement correctly in the sense of like constant time and preventing all kinds of attacks. There's a nice paper from Daniel Bernstein about it. And I do think some projects take it more seriously than others. For example, I think Ethereum takes this quite seriously, and I think there's a nice roadmap there. Personally, I think one choice they're making is to just go with the hash-based approach. Obviously, the choice of the hash function itself is kind of up to debate still, but I'm optimistic where we can allow for very, very conservative choices in the future. So I'm optimistic on the Ethereum ecosystem, at least being able to do this.
And so if you're an institution and you hold either ERC20 tokens on Ethereum or some Bitcoin, like what type of thing should you include in your plan? Can you just be like, okay, I'm waiting for the chain to migrate?
I mean, that's not a complete plan, especially if you have customer funds, and also there will be regulatory pressure. This is coming as well. So what most likely will be the augmentation layer at first is to have what I think Tamir or Bruno mentioned is hybrid keys, or hybrid solutions. We already have something here using smart accounts where you have a PQ signature and a classical signature. Think about it something as a multi-sig, right? So if you have both, you can unlock your funds, and cool, right? So if the classical one is broken, then they have the quantum one. If the quantum one is broken, then you have the classical. So that's kind of maybe even the future of kind of crypto in general, to have even more than two. Like who knows? Like people forget that the quantum computer, even when it comes, it's not the end of new devices. So there will probably be even more innovation down the line. Okay. Now this saves you. Let's give it like a degree of 0 to 100% quantum safe. If you do this, you are more quantum safe than not. Right? You can say we have a dual keys with a quantum device. Whenever it comes, you cannot just directly take assets out of my wallet or out of the wallet where I hold user's custody. Right. That doesn't mean that you can be sure that you will still not kind of be hacked or whatever if the chain gets hacked, right? Someone could hack the validators, change the consensus, etc., etc., etc. But it kind of helps you not to be single-outed and say, hey, I'm going for, I don't know, company XYZ's wallet. So that is the first plan. Later on, it will be, that's why we're also working on the offensive part, if you want, to say, okay, we want to give in an ethically correct way our clients and the world and researchers a really good path to say, this is where we are currently. This is realistic. This is where we're going to be next year. This is where we're going to be in 2 years, 3 years. And if anyone's going to do it, ideally it's an ethical company and not like a state actor or, I don't know, a foreign nation. Right? For now, the idea was always it's going to be the state actor. It's going to be this, 3-letter agency who's going to have the quantum computer. But if history showed us recently who has the AI labs or the AI frontier labs, it's not the 3-letter agency, right? It's Anthropic and it's OpenAI. It's private labs which arguably have a very good ethical moral code, have the best talent, and these people were able to have frontier AI. And I think very similar to quantum here, and I hope it's going to be like that, because you want to do this very, very transparently. Right? The worst case scenario for quantum is it's happening tomorrow. No one knows about it. It kind of escapes the lab in a sense, like COVID, and no one is prepared. That's the worst case. The best case is we know in 5 years we're going to reach it, maybe, or 6, and you get every month an update. This is where we are currently.
And so what does it mean to be quantum safe? Right. Because I mean, it's sort of becoming a sort of label for like people are trying to say, well, like we're potentially like this is quantum safe, right? But what does it mean? And if you're an institutional investor and you hear, oh, we're quantum safe, how should you treat that information?
Or Tamir, if you
maybe I can take a step back a little bit. I think this is where assumptions in cryptography come more to the foreground for the public that doesn't always think about this. So the thing with cryptography is a lot of cryptography relies on assumptions. Like we assume this problem is hard for computers to do. And that has been the situation for elliptic-curve cryptography for a while. It's actually the situation with everything. And there are really good reasons to assume these problems are hard, but there's no proof that they're hard. So that has been the situation forever in internet cryptography. Now, in quantum computers, we know that some certain class of algorithms is not like safe against them. So they are easier to solve with a quantum computer. What's leaving us, and then there is a lot of analysis, like for every new problem that comes up, whether it's lattice-based, hash-based, or anything like that, there is a community of researchers that tries to break them with either a classical computer or a quantum computer on the theoretical level. Like if we had a quantum computer, could we have broken this? And like elliptic-curve cryptography, the only thing we can do is like have that be battle tested against research. In these days, going to be against AI. So when people say we are quantum safe, if they did it correctly, what they should mean is we only use schemes that are believed to be not breakable by quantum computer.
Yep. And yeah, Bruno or Ivan, anything to add on this?
Yeah, I'll just add one quick point is like to the quantum safe in quotes. For example, institutions might ask themselves like, am I quantum safe? Are my assets safe? A lot of these institutions might look for their custodial infrastructure pieces that they rely on to keep their sort of key materials secure. And that's one element of this whole space. I personally think this whole space has been very immature in this area. I think we've been quite slow to integrate sort of the known standards and techniques that we've learned from decades of doing security on the web. And a lot of these institutional players might wait for those pieces of infrastructure to mature and giving them the capabilities to offer PUQ resistant cryptography and key management in particular. And a lot of those won't move until certain organizations do say move ahead with their stamp of approval, namely NIST. And once that happens, I think the institutional players will feel a lot more comfortable in being ready for PUQ, because they rely a lot of times not on self-custody wallets, but on infrastructure custodial solutions to manage those assets.
I can give an analogy from the current world. So with current, let's say you're a TEX or a DEX or whatever, you have two ways to audit yourself. There is the sign of approval audit, which you kind of pay and you get the stamp and you can now maybe get the license or whatever. And then there's also the kind of, what are the best security companies in the world out there who can really defend us from like the best hackers in the world? So I think these are two different kind of things, right? One is regulatory. You need to have an audit, but this will not cover you from like the best hacker in the world, right? It will cover you maybe from like the majority of hacks. But if like someone is really, really good, this like regulatory frame will not protect you. I think it's similar here as well. So NIST gives you a framework, gives you standards, gives you like a regulatory framework. People will have to comply with this, especially in TradFi and Web2 and like all the kind of more regulated industries. But I hope digital assets are also going to be more regulated, and it's kind of the indication is there. And once you have that means you are kind of quantum safe on paper. But to be fully quantum safe, you will have to collaborate with the leading research labs. Like you will have to know directly from kind of the first source, where are we with quantum? Like that is the most important thing. And I really want a world where these research labs are public and not like some clandestine. We are not allowed to talk about it. No one knows the name of these companies. That is the worst future we can have. That is almost like the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, and there are also tons of questions around the bounty program model, which is kind of breaking the part. But yeah, there's tons of things going on there. The other part is in the infrastructure stack, what layers are vulnerable, and that's what I wanted to ask Tamir is how much quantum exposure is hiding in infrastructure that institutions might never see, and what are you guys doing about that part?
Well, there's actually two parts to this. I mean, there's like another like can of worms we didn't talk about, which is like some of the custodial actors where they have HSMs. A lot of those HSMs also rely on non-quantum cryptography. There's actually a lot to do. Actually, in crypto, we at least know where the cryptography is. A lot of institutions don't even know where they're encrypted. Like, I think Dan Bonaire was kind of saying this. Like a lot of code bases don't even know where they use cryptography necessarily. So that's one aspect. So it's always hiding. And the other aspect is, yeah, I guess all I wanted to say that it is hiding in many layers, especially in proof systems. There's a lot of non-quantum cryptography, especially for these short proofs that are right now, like, all these privacy solutions or a lot of ZK solutions, they post short proofs on chain, and all these short proofs really require, we don't know how to do it in a post-quantum way. So for that, we really need different paradigms. So like how we post proofs, how we prove things on chain. And there are solutions to this, but they require like a little bit of a shift of a paradigm in how they work.
Yeah, and on to by the way, Ivan and Bruno, anything you'd want to add on this? Okay, cool. So let's move on also on like what the consensus is, like the key pieces of the blockchain infrastructure, namely the main layer 1 consensus protocol, then having all those blockchains interact through bridges, and like, do we need some kind of standards to facilitate that communication? And so, Bruno, you guys have, of course, developed a very thoughtful roadmap to try and build that transition. What's what has been the hardest step? Where do you guys stand, and what are the different steps, and what's the most challenging?
So in the case in Algorand in general, I guess you're asking. So for us, obviously, and commonly to any distributed ledger blockchain system, your accounts directly need to be sort of planned to move into hybrid or PQ schemes. Then you have the networking stack and namely consensus. And consensus is sort of, in the case of Algorand, we use this primitive called the VRF to do this random lottery, which is a weight-based system to elect who gets part of these committees for certification and block production. That relies partially on elliptic-curve cryptography, so we will need to address that at some point. Partially because it also does hashing and whatnot, so it's not like it's completely broken, but we do, if a quantum computer were to come online tomorrow, we do lose some properties. And we need to address that. And we've been thinking quite hard about this problem. And there'll be things taken into this account, but it's something that we're doing a lot of R&D on. And this is one of the key pieces, at least for sortition-based system. There's other networks that use VRF, and so they have the same problem. So maybe R&D will be useful to others as well. But it will come down, something will be announced in the future. There's not much I can say right now, but there will be steps making in this direction. Then there is also how people, in the case of Algorand, once you get to these committees, you vote and certify blocks, and there is votes happening, and the network waits for a certain threshold to be met. And those messages also rely on elliptic-curve cryptography, and in a future version, we'll have to harden those as well. And so we've been thinking about this as well, but I do think, I like to think that everybody's thinking about this, like even the systems that are not VRF-based, that the ones who have static staking pool sets, proof-of-stake systems, they're likely thinking about this problem. So we have our solution, our thought process around this because it's specific to us. But I'm sure the rest of the industry is thinking along as well.
And Ivan, you mentioned also like having the sort of world in which you keep both keys, and you have both the old system as a backstop and like the new system, and if the new system breaks or the old system breaks, and you keep both in parallel. Can you tell us more about this? Is it having belts and suspenders, or is what does that look like? What does a transition window look like? And where is the real danger there?
Okay, so the hybrid schemes are for wallets, and they are not most likely. They're pretty gas heavy, so it's more like an enterprise solution where you really want to have absolute safety, and you are not going to be very sensitive to cost. The average Joe will most likely not use like MPCs, hybrid solutions, etc. They want a working solution which is kind of cheap in gas costs. This is the biggest hurdle right now. There's a company called ZK Knox. I want to highlight them. They're really doing a good job there. Very active in the Ethereum research community to kind of decrease gas for what you call it, thermal keys. Okay. Migration, though, is something else. So when we talk about migration, I talk about you have Ethereum now, and then you will have Ethereum post-quantum. With Ethereum, this is most likely going to happen because Vitalik is there and there's a leadership in the EF. So we will be having a consensus, which is the PQ canonical chain. Same as we had a consensus with the POS transition. With the post-quantum, though, you will have to somehow do an action in your wallet. And this is very challenging because what do we do with users who don't have the possibility to action in their wallet? Maybe they are on a 6-year cruise and just forgot their phone, right? Or they are, they just went to sleep. They live on an island somewhere and they bought Ethereum because they thought, okay, I'm going to buy this and I never have to think about money anymore because when I come back from my adventure, I'll be rich. Okay, for Ethereum, there is a number. It's debated how much of these orphan coins exist. Obviously, Ethereum Foundation says it's very low. We believe it's a bit higher. Doesn't matter. Where it matters more is Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, we know for sure there is this guy or this group of people who are called Satoshi Nakamoto, and they hold a lot of Bitcoin. And they haven't been active since 2008 or 9. Another question is, what would happen if tomorrow there would be like one Bitcoin missing from these wallets? Is it a quantum attack? Is it Satoshi's coming back? And then the question here is, if you freeze his coins or their coins, then you're kind of defying the whole purpose of Bitcoin, because then you're saying censorship resistance doesn't really exist, right? It's like the whole purpose of Bitcoin is to say no one can freeze your assets. It's decentralized, right? No one can really say you're a bad guy and you're not allowed to have this monetary asset. That's why it's a super popular global currency, right? On the other hand, if you don't freeze them, it's very likely a quantum device operator will take them, right? So are you going to be truly libertarian and say, well, technology advanced, it's Satoshi's fault that he didn't migrate, so whoever gets this first, kind of the One Piece, right? The anime where kind of they all kind of race to get the One Piece. Or are you saying, okay, we have this, for the first time we're going to censorship resist or take Satoshi's coins and put them in some segregated account or whatever it is? That is not the question, right? So that is a very philosophical question, and that's the hurdle of migration. That's what I'm saying. Like this is going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, and what about establishing standards? What role do you see for either regulators or self-regulation from industry?
I mean, for regulators, I think it will be mostly around stablecoins, which is kind of relevant because these are products used by hundreds of millions of people, which rely on them not for having a speculative asset or having like this decentralized assets, more like a real thing they need to survive, right? So if you live in a country where you have a really weak currency, you use USDT or USDC, but mostly USDT, to kind of survive, right? So there has to be some sort of regulation around these products. These are like more than crypto. These are like more fintech products, right? They rely on blockchain, on rails of blockchain. But for them, I think regulation is very important because you don't want anyone to lose their last $100 or $200 they really need to buy to survive with. Like, let's say you are avocado farmer in the California and you make, I don't know, $200 a day or something like that, and then you send those dollars back to where you're coming from, and a lot of these people use USDT, and you don't really want those people to suffer like an attack like this because that means they cannot buy the meal, right? So that is very important. That's a different, I would say, set of problems which requires regulation. But luckily there is a Genius Act, there is Clarity Act, maybe more acts coming. I think this kind of whole area has to be regulated. On the decentralized side, on the chain side, that's democracy, and democracy is great because everyone can participate, but it also is very slow. And I fear that it's like this double-edged sword, what made Bitcoin strong might eventually maybe lead to its weakening.
Yeah, go ahead, Tamir.
Yeah, in terms of standards, I think there's like a few things. I mean, if we go back to the post-quantum world here, until now, there's this like NIST approved standards have been the golden rule of like what are people deploying or allowing themselves to deploy. I think that should continue. And I think NIST is also showing like signs that they are willing to be flexible and looking at more standards, approving more standards. For example, they have been considering this leaner hash-based signature scheme that has like more realistic, thresholds, whereas like the existing approved one is maybe very conservative and therefore performing less great. So I think I'm actually very optimistic that it will be possible. And I think I'm also optimistic on snarks being used for that kind of thing to be able to cater to those schemes instead of inventing our own. I think that should be our mission as like people developing zero knowledge proofs. And yeah, in Ethereum, that's basically one of the paradigm shifts is to not think of like every person who wants to post a proof, because those proofs are going to get too expensive if it's 100 kilobyte per proof. But what we are going to do is use this miracle of aggregation of proofs, where you can take two proofs and aggregate them into one, and you can do this off chain and only post this like one proof per block. That does require some change in like how gossip works, how all these things work. I think it will be a quite challenging change, kind of similar to the merge, but I do think that with the right guardrails and testing, similar to previous hard forks, that it is possible. So
yeah, there's some issues when you need like horizontal transfer right of the proofs, right? Because then you get congested. Yeah.
I would just like to add one thing on standards. So I agree with everything the guy said, but there's one. I find it funny that for the longest time, this industry didn't care about what NIST thought, and NIST later came down and even sort of gave the stamp of approval on sort of the Edwards curves and EDSA whatnot, was really nice. And now we're all like looking for NIST for guidance, which is good for enterprise. But there are other things that I think for what people should look for the projects is them to being agile, because there are certain things that you might want different properties and different schemes that you might not have available on the static set that today we have. And it's an evolving set of endorsed standards that move along. So we don't know what's going to land. So I think the flexibility of the networks and the projects, the custody, is quite important. And there's another set of standards that actually I do think the industry needs to come together and align, is we're going to migrate all this wallet ecosystem tooling that we have agreed for, a little bit over past decade, how we get keys, how we back them, recover them, how we derive accounts from these seeds and initial information, especially on the self-custody side. And that's a bit murky with these new schemes because there are so many of them and everybody has an idea how to do this. And it sort of puts the ecosystems a little bit waiting for what. So I think the ecosystem, everybody needs to come together, because I have an opinion and I'm sure Tamir and Ivan has an opinion how to get these keys. So I think we do need to come together, and because this is going to move into the custodial hardware wallets pieces, so we need to talk to each other. So about this.
Yeah. So and totally with you there. And to conclude and wrap everything up, let's do two quick fire rounds. The first one is you're an investor or an institution operating in crypto. What should you change next week? What should you start working on next week?
Yeah, I would say do an inventory of cryptographic exposure. It's like a week of work to just get an overview where you are on the risk, and then use existing software. We are a software provider, so obviously we are gonna suggest you to use ours, but there's also others, like whatever, you can solicit a few other companies and add post-quantum lattices you maybe can ask your clients if they want it. Like if you're a custodian, you could just go to your clients and be like, hey, for 20 bips more, I can add you a PQ signature. Do you want that, right? And I think for people managing hundreds of millions, billions, or tens of billions, or even hundreds of billions of dollars, that is a very low cost comparable what these are, because the biggest enterprise will obviously be the biggest, like they're the biggest targets, right? You wouldn't go for a wallet which has like $50 inside. You would go for a wallet which has $50 billion inside, right? That would be kind of the game theoretical plan. And I think for those big enterprises, they have to always put safety first. And I don't think the cost is that high. Like it doesn't cost you an incredible amount of money to add PQ signatures or PQ safe signatures.
Yep. And Tamir, if you want to go next.
Yeah, just adding. I mean, I think I basically agree with that. So just adding that, I think one more thing for investors. Well, I think for custodians, obviously, there's a lot of things they need to do. But for investors, one thing that they maybe need to think about is that public perception of how safe things are might not always correlate with like the quantum timeline, and depending on like the technology, like I think we have to do this transition just because it's like eventually going to happen, and the eventually doesn't really matter when it is, because at some point trust will kind of go down and down and down, especially if there's alternatives. Right now, the alternatives don't really fully materialize, but once they do, then the pressure will be bigger.
Yeah, for me, yeah, I agree with everything. So I would just say that if you're a really concerned investor or you're studying what the space is looking like and what would be the experience of using new schemes and protecting assets, yeah, you have to do your due diligence. So at least, I would just put, obviously, Algorand, we do have, since last year, the ability to deploy Falcon-backed accounts through this stateless program we call L6. And if you're really worried and you already have accounts where you have assets, you can use this rekey capability to just change the authority of the key if you're really worried about QQ. Now, I do think that most people have a balancing act of how worried they are versus how much they have. It's a risk assessment, but it's important people have a plan, and the tooling over time needs to be deployed to make it available for people to make their choices there.
Yeah, and the rekeying is such a cool feature for anyone who's tried to migrate an Ethereum wallet. So yeah, final fire round, which is the easiest. Where can people find you, and what is the next milestone or big thing that they should be watching? And Bruno, if you want to go first, since you went last on the
So where people find, so I'm not a big social media person, but I try to make myself out there now. It's like, so you can find me, try to find my handle, and reach out if you want to talk about QQ and Falcon and Algorand and custody blockchain in general. So I'm happy to discuss those topics. In terms of actual roadmap, so I can't say too much, but there will be quite a bit of updates on this, especially in this particular field. We've been focusing really hard on giving the best offering possible in this particular field. So there will be news and details to share quite soon.
Mm-hmm. And Tamir?
Yeah, so you can find Succinct at Succinct on Twitter and on our website. Some of the interesting things to look into are our post-quantum upgrade for our proving system, which is fitting this panel, and also some other innovations that I think are going to be really important for being able to use the more established hash functions versus like doing something too adventurous. So more ZK research coming for us.
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I think we have also Reddit now. Growing, not really good on Reddit, but Twitter and LinkedIn look good. Next milestone for us is we are releasing a new challenge for the automated research. Call it like a paper challenge, where we are now identified one more metric which can be improved. It's called magic states. That's like really like on the offensive side of quantum. Like the whole thesis of us is we want to be the ethically best company to progress the field. So people can trust that there are good people who are also trying to do this, kind of to break ECDSA, not only the bad guys. That's the first milestone. And the second is based on that, we derive all of our products. Then we say, okay, this is what's currently real. You should do this because this is your restrictor. And here we are rolling out retail-oriented, not retail, it's not a good word, I would say, a users-oriented wallet, which can also be used not just by enterprises, but by anyone really to kind of, with one click, use a PQSafe wallet. That's a kind of two main things for us.
Awesome. Well, I think that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much for participating in it and sharing your insights. Thank you for building to keep us safe. And thanks to all the participants and viewers online. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was nice to
Bye-bye.
meet you. Thank you. Bye, bye, bye. Ciao,
Bye-bye.
ciao, ciao.